When we approached the edge of the village, that's where the lead tank was hit. There was this awful scream, and that's the sound of a high-velocity gun, a tank gun. And the tank was hit. And since we were on both sides of the tank, it was fortunate that none of our guys were hit. But the tank driver then put the engine in reverse, and then the crew bailed out, so you had a 32-ton tank running wild, and it dropped off the road and it circled in the field beside the roadway, and then it burned there. And meanwhile, the infantry, our squad, we had left the roadway on the left side of the road and took shelter by a fence line, and we weren't there very long when Major McGeorge came to us and almost in a fatherly tone of voice told us what he was going to do. He was going to have the remaining 4 tanks, 3 tanks on the right side of the road spread out, 1 tank on the left side of the road, and at the signal we would make a dash for the entrance of the village. And when the signal was given, everybody, all the tanks opened fire, and we infantry followed as closely as we could behind the tanks. And when the tanks came right here, all the buildings were destroyed at the entrance to the village. There was nothing above ground level. All there was were rubble-filled foundations. And when we got here, we thought we were in pretty good shape. We could see the Germans withdrawing. The village was on fire, so there was light that illuminated enough so we could see the German soldiers withdrawing. But then we formed up along this roadway here, and then we could hear the sound of tank engines. And then Lieutenant Melitz came to us, George and me, who were the bazooka team, and ordered us to move up this roadway to take a position and to intercept anything that would come down that way. And we went up this way, and there was a fence line there, and we lay down behind the fence line, and all of a sudden, at least 2 Germans came squirting out behind us, who must have been hiding somewhere, and they ran right almost over us, getting back to their own men. But it happened so fast, nobody got off a shot. You know, it was so startling that nobody fired a shot. But anyway, you know, we didn't give much thought to that. But then later on, somebody said, has anybody checked that house up there? Must be that old house up there. There was only one house over here. Must be that one. So they went and checked it after we were here maybe an hour or 2. And there were at least 14 German soldiers in there. We got them prisoner. We marched them down here, and we were forming them up. And I mean, we thought we were on top of the world. We thought we had the world by the, you know what. And we were talking and laughing and forming them up to march them back. And then Captain Jordan called Lieutenant Melitz to him over there where his tank was positioned. And he ordered Melitz to move us into the village. See, now our initial objective was to set up a roadblock here, which we had done. What we had done was establish a roadblock here. And Jordan ordered Melitz to move us into the village. And then Melitz said, are you sending your tanks? And then Captain Jordan said no. And then Melitz said, well, what do we have for support? And he said, you have your rifles. What a pathetic joke. There was almost a battalion of Panzer Grenadiers in this village, and there were at least 13 tanks, I think principally Panzer Mark V Panthers. And you have your rifles, was his reply. And Melitz then replied, I'll do it, but I don't like it. And I'd say within 5 minutes, he was dead. Because we formed up, I remember the other squad formed on the left side of the road, and our squad formed on the right side of the road, and we couldn't have gone more than 50, 75 feet when there was a horrible explosion, and there was a big tree near Mrs. Gabby's house, and that thing was just sliced off. And there was a trailer, an abandoned trailer, that was there. And we then were ordered, when things started getting hot, those of us who were over here were then ordered to cross the road into that basement over there. And but that meant climbing up out of the foundation walls. You have all your equipment. I had the bazooka rounds. And the road was under fire. There was fire coming from this point, fire coming right down the street, and fire coming from our left. So it was all converging behind us, the fire. But it's tough to crawl out of a basement onto the street level and then get up enough speed with all your equipment and everything, cross the street under fire, then jump down into the other foundation walls, you know. But anyway, what made it difficult is because the bodies of Millets and Wordman, one of the bodies was slumped over the hitch of the trailer, and the other body was nearby, but we had to run past their bodies, and that's tough. And we jumped down there into the foundation. And then in rapid succession, these 3 tanks were knocked out. So that left one Sherman tank and those of us over there. And at that time, we did not know that orders had come for the company to withdraw. But before that, the 75th Division came in behind us while this was going on here. The 75th Division came in behind us, and they started digging in. And they sounded like a bunch of schoolboys. I mean, they're yelling to each other, addressing each other by rank, for crying out loud, and they're digging foxholes. And I mean, to us, it was a freaking joke. I mean, these are soldiers. We're depending on them, you know. But anyway, then finally, we could tell by the sound of the tank engines that an attack was coming. And that's when Captain Jordan, from his tank, he called down to us, and we knew that an attack was imminent. And that's when he called down to us and said, "There's only one thing to do." He said, "and that's to call artillery down on our own position." You know, what are you going to say? You know, what are you going to say when you're told that? But I remember I was in the right front from here, in that foundation, in the basement, in the rubble, and literally trying to crawl into my steel helmet, because when he said that, when Captain Jordan said that about calling artillery down on, he immediately radioed back the coordinates of our position. And then, of course, until they realign the guns, takes some time. But when they fire from the artillery position, they will simply shout, "It's on the way, it's on the way." And then when Captain Jordan got the word from artillery, "It's on the way," he called out to us, "It's on the way." But then he slid down the turret of his tank, closed the steel hatch over his head, and I said we were out there with nothing but the Christmas sky over our heads. But you can't believe we had awesome artillery, I mean that. Those guys could fire guns. In fact, I've repeated this a number of times already, but it's true. in the beginning, the Germans were convinced that we had belt-fed artillery. That's how fast these guys could. The 105s, they called it the Priest. It was the 105 in our artillery battalion was mounted on the tank chassis, you know. But that stuff came slamming into the village that you can't believe. Churchill used the phrase about bombing German cities, about making the rubble bounce. And that's what happened in Grand Menil. They made the rubble bounce here. But the amazing thing was that when the fire, and I was trying to burrow into the rubble, trying to crawl into my steel helmet, while this stuff is slamming in all around you, you know, and finally, it seemed like an interminable period of time. Finally, the fire lifted, you know, and, you know, by the grace of God, not one round fell inside of that foundation. And so that was our Christmas miracle, you know. But then again, I said, we didn't know that the rest of the company had withdrawn. So we were here by ourselves, literally about 12 infantry with one lousy Sherman tank. And we still had the German troops intact. But then we were there, but the artillery did the job. They must have sustained terrible losses because, as I had mentioned already, all of the German infantry must have come out of their shelter to mount the attack. So they were all out in the open, possibly, when that artillery came slamming in. And the next day, we came across, and this is, I'm not exaggerating, there was a room in one of the houses, or the remnants of one of the houses, where the blood literally covered the floor. And there was a woman there, and she then said that the Germans were even talking of surrender. I mean, that's how horrible the artillery attack was, you know. But then we were there till daylight. Jordan said he sat there all night surrounded by Germans. He was also surrounded by Americans, you know. And then when daylight came, there was a young officer in the barn, and he called over to us and told us to join them. So again, but the machine gun fire was still active, you know, coming from that direction.